reading a book is just, it's so much more than just reading words. Reading a book about history, ancient history, about the Persian Empire, Roman Empire, the ancient Greeks. I mean, reading about these civilizations, it's just enriching. Reading poetry, not all poetry, but reading some old poetry, ancient poetry is fascinating. Reading about ancient Middle Eastern archaeology or any sort of ancient history, reading about historical events, it gives you, there's a sort of character that it builds into you. There's a sort of character that it builds into you because you start learning about how things work. When you read history, you start learning about how, for one thing, that humanity hasn't changed. Our technology has changed, sure, but we ourselves have not changed. The technology is simply used as a way to... Technology is just a platform for human nature. That's all it is. Social media is a platform for human nature. But human nature doesn't change. And when you start reading history, you start noticing patterns. You start noticing parallels with your own time. So you can look at things happening in your own time and say, no, we've done this before. We've seen this. We've been down this road and it doesn't lead to anything good. And that's what reading history does for you. There was a Greek writer, ancient Greek writer. I forgot who it was. I think it was. What's his name? The guy who wrote on the Peloponnesian War, Thucydides. Am I pronouncing his name correctly? Peloponnesian. Thucydides. Yeah, I think it was Thucydides who said something to the likes of, out of all the things that a man can learn, history is by far the most important subject of learning. Because in history, you see wisdom. And there's a certain mentality that some people have where they'll say, well, I learned from the school of hard knocks. Now, I'm not going to take that away, but when they start saying that in the sense of they're better than someone who reads books because they learn from the school of hard knocks, I take issue with that because a lot of times the people who say I learned from the school of hard knocks are the very people who fall for political manipulation. You see this all the time. Oh, I don't read no books. I learned from the school of hard knocks. Well, okay, but you'll see them Sieg Heiling in some crowd. Whereas when you actually take the time to read history, read about the rise of the Third Reich and read about the rise of the Nazis. Don't base your opinion on some reels that you watched or something. Or don't base your opinion on just some documentary, because a lot of times I think documentaries can be very limited. But when you actually take the time to absorb information about a particular historical event, especially something as major as the rise of the Third Reich, you will pick up a lot of things about politics and how politics work, and you will pick up a lot of things on how people are manipulated into believing certain political ideologies, certain dangerous ideologies. And after the Second World War, a lot of Germans said that they were bamboozled, that they were fooled. And I believe them. I think a lot of people honestly thought that they were making the correct choice when they voted for the Nazis, because they had the rise of the communists and they had the rise, they saw left-wing terrorism and they saw degeneracy being pushed in their country, and they saw all of this craziness. Germany had lost a war. Millions of Germans died in the First World War. Tons of Germans starved to death. I mean, the starvation in Germany during World War I was horrendous. 117 Rebel says, Ted, you're making me want to leave your stream and start a book. Well, I mean... Oh, my little timer is on. I mean, if you want to read a book, don't let me stop you. I want people to read more books. I want people to sit down and read about the Third Reich. One day, I think I'll give a tour of my library here, my little library that I have here. But I just can't imagine a world without reading. I mean, I can, but I don't imagine it being a very pleasant world. There's a scene from an old black and white film. I don't know the name of the film, but it's a famous scene where I think the aliens take over the world and everything's burning, and everything's on fire. But there's this one human, and he's this older guy. He looks like Einstein, and he has glasses on, and he's in a library. And there's the world is destroyed. The world is in ruins, but he's in this library, and the books are all there. And he says, "Oh, I have all this book, and I have all these books, and I have all the time now to read all these books and to gain all this knowledge." And then his glasses fall down, and his glasses break, and he can't see without his glasses. And now he is imprisoned by his own blindness, and he cannot read. And that scene has always stuck to my head, because to me that is a form of hell. It's a form of hell. Because reading is such an amazing thing. When you I'm not talking about reading Twilight. That's bullshit. But let's say you want to learn about a particular subject. Let's say you want to learn about World War I, or you want to learn about the Lebanese Civil War, and you find a book that's very large. It's a brick, and it's about that one subject. You read that book, and then you look at society around you, and you can say, well, we've seen this before, and I've seen this before, and we've seen this one before. We've seen this one road, and it doesn't look good. Once you realize that human nature has never changed, technology has changed, but human nature has not changed. And once you realize that everything that happens today, as far as geopolitics go, as far as war goes, as far as tensions between countries go, as far as tension between ethnicities go, once you realize this, then you can look at things happening today and say, we've seen this before, we've gone down this road before, and it doesn't look pretty. And I remember years ago reading a book. Back in 2021, I read this book. It was called Pity the Nation by Robert Fisk, and it was on the Lebanese Civil War. It was an excellent book. Truly an excellent book. And it was on the Lebanese Civil War, and it talked about the rise of Lebanese Maronite nationalism. The Maronites, by the way, for those of you who do not know, are the Catholics of Lebanon. The Catholic Church of Lebanon is called the Maronite Church, and you'll see them everywhere. Just believe me, there's probably one in your area, Maronite Church. And you'll see churches like Our Lady of Lebanon, our St. Shotable Catholic Church, and these are all Maronite churches. The Maronite Church, I think, goes back to a guy named Saint Maron. But the saint that the Maronites focus on more than any other saint is St. Shotable. For whatever reason, I don't know why. Maybe there's someone who's Lebanese here who can help us with that. I don't know why they focus so much on St. Shotable, but back in the what was it, 1930s or 40s, there was a guy, a Lebanese guy. He was a Maronite. He went to Germany during the Olympics, and that was at the time when Germany was under Nazism, and he saw the organization of the brown shirts, and he liked that. He admired the Nazis, so he thought, why can't we have something like this back in Lebanon? So he went back to Lebanon, and he started a paramilitary organization, and he organized it based on the Nazis. And the idea was that Lebanon should be for the Maronites, that Lebanon, not just, I don't think it was just the Maronites, but that Lebanon should be for the Lebanese, that the Lebanese were actually the descendants of the Phoenicians, and the Phoenician race should be the dominating people in Lebanon. And this ideology eventually it continued on, and it was at the center of hatred against Palestinian people. There was a lot of hatred against Palestinians. And even before terrorism broke out, or before the civil war in Lebanon broke out, I mean, Palestinian people were not treated very well, from what I've read. They were not really allowed to have equal opportunity in the job market in Lebanon. Usually the type of work that Palestinians were doing was construction. Anyway, I don't want the stream to be so concentrated on the Lebanese war. But the fact is that there was a horrendous event that happened in the early 1980s where the Lebanese nationalists defeated the PLO with the help of Israel. And the PLO, which was the biggest terrorist organization in the world at that time, the PLO surrendered and they made an agreement with the Phalangists. And this was one of the hardest things I've ever read about. I think it was one of the most saddest things I've ever read in my life. Truly, one of the most saddest things I've ever read about in my life. The Lebanese and the Palestinians made an agreement, and part of the agreement was that the Palestinians would leave Lebanon, and the PLO would leave Lebanon, and the PLO left Lebanon, and they went off to, I think, North Africa. The PLO left, and what that left was a bunch of unarmed Palestinian civilians in the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. The PLO was not there to protect them. And because the PLO was not there to protect them, the Phalangists decided to have a little bit of fun. And their idea of fun was doing a massacre. And they went into the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila, and they spent about 3 days doing nothing but butchering and raping. One of the most horrific things I've ever read about in my life. And the government that facilitated that massacre was Israel. Israel watched it. Israel allowed it to happen. Israel could have stopped it, but it didn't. And Israel allowed that shit to happen. And I know that I have been sympathetic to Israel because of October the 7th. I know that I have supported the policy of destroying Hamas. And I still support that policy. I think Hamas needs to be gotten rid of. It should not be there. But at the same time, I understand that Israel is not innocent, that Israel has done terrible things. And it's just, it really messes with me sometimes, I'll be honest with you guys, because I will express support for Israel, but I also understand that Israel has done very messed up things. And I also understand that at one point, the PLO did surrender, and the PLO did withdraw, and the Palestinian terrorists did withdraw. And what that left was a bunch of Palestinians completely helpless. So I understand, in a sense, the Palestinian cause. And I understand, in a sense, I understand that Israel is not innocent. It's not. Israel's not innocent. It's bullshit. What Hamas did on October the 7th was unforgivable. It was horrendous what Hamas did. And Hamas needs to be punished and destroyed for that. But Israel has done some messed up things. But I read that book years ago by Robert Fisk. And that book really, really helped me. And it talked a lot about Lebanese nationalism. And I look at Lebanon today, and what do I see? I see the Lebanese being racist against Syrians. And I say to myself, Lebanon has been down this road. And it doesn't look pretty. Doesn't look pretty.